Okay, you're alive, Greg.
I'm alive. I'm alive.
He's alive. Stay alive. Stay alive.
He lives.
It's alive. Gonna give them some Mozart in the background. Three, two.
Allegro in D. All right.
It's Allegro. I wonder if that's where they got Allegro from. You know, the allergy medicine. Okay, there we are. Share.
I see it live.
Facebook. Share it to my friend's timeline. And where's Greg Rapport at? Fixing. Okay, Greg, I shared it on your Facebook.
I don't see it there. Let me refresh. No, I don't see it. Ah, there it is. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Got it. All right. Hang on. Got to do a bunch of shares.
Right.
That's it. We're good.
Okay. Hold tight. And take it, Greg.
Welcome, welcome, everyone. It is 6:29 on Monday night. You're listening to the 213th installment of the Age Out Angels Radio Hour on www.hamiltonradio.net Channel 2. I'm your host, Greg Rapport. I'm the founder and executive director of Age Out Angels. We're a 501c3 nonprofit corporation. Age Out Angels provides one-to-one mentors to vulnerable youth for the purpose of coordinating the care and services that they need to thrive. We try to help young people avoid some of the horrible pitfalls that they're likely to face when they don't have a proper safety net. This program is brought to you every week at the same time, courtesy of Doc G, William Saunders, Ruben Rodriguez, and all the fine people here at Hamilton Radio who allow us to use this airtime. Ruben is on the big board tonight. Robin is producing. So good to have both of you with me, as always. And so good to have you listening in from your computers in home, in your cars or at home or wherever you are across the country and around the world. It's our last show of the year, so you bet we're going to talk a little bit about reforming child welfare tonight. What do you think? Along with a very interesting story about the decision makers in a particular area of education where the decision that they're making is actually self-defeating the purpose they're trying to achieve. I'm sure you'll be entertained by that. And of course, later on, our weekly example of white privilege that you probably hadn't thought of. That's sort of the whole point of this, is to begin to sort of recognize that there are some truths in that if you're not on the receiving end, you don't really see. Hey, if you'd like to add to the discussion, positive or negative, sorry you can't call in tonight. We're working on a new voice system using Google Voice that's going to enable you to call in, but we don't have the bugs worked out yet, so you can't call in. You can get to my Facebook page and put a note in the comments field, and you can do that now. Or you can do it, if you happen to see the show at some later date, it will still live on my Facebook page where you can post a comment. Understand that we are aware that many of the things we talk about on this show can trigger some pretty deep feelings. And the thing is, if there is any part of you that is thinking about harming yourself, please pick up the phone, dial 988, 3 simple digits, 988. When you are in your most vulnerable state, that's a moment when you really need to talk to someone who's trained to talk to you. And so that's not me. It's not other people, friends and stuff like that in your life. It's someone who really knows. 988, it's easy enough. Please do it if that's how you're feeling. Please take a moment. Also, if you're looking at us on Facebook or YouTube, hit all the buttons for me. We need you to like and subscribe and share. Share this with everyone in your world. Everything that I'm about to say tonight applies to, there's not a geographic region in the world that is spared of any of the things that I'm going to talk about tonight. But I guarantee you that you are not going to hear this on the nightly news. And you can write to me in the comments field on Facebook during the show if you'd like to, but please share this with Facebook friends and share it with YouTube friends if possible. We appreciate that so very, very much. I want to remind people all over New Jersey about the Bridges to Employment program. Fact is, it simply doesn't get any better than when high school actually comes to you. Think about that. You don't have to get on the school bus comes to you. I will tell you that on the education front in general, things are not looking good coming out of the pandemic. I think this is like the second or third show in a row where I've said those exact same words. Word is out about some schools that are actually exacerbating the problem. So the Hechinger report, they're going to dole this out in 3 increments. Okay, so the first part, this is just the first part of this report. It's just a setup. It's written by 3 people: Maria Poletta, Gara Garcia Mathewson, and Fazil Khan. And this is a program called Education Suspended. This is a collaboration between the Arizona Center for Investigative Reporting and the Hechinger report. It represents an ambitious, nearly year-long effort to better understand the impact of school absences on Arizona students. When kids aren't in class, they aren't learning, a reality that was underscored by the COVID-19 pandemic. So this series isn't just about why students miss class, though. The collaborative investigation is more about what Arizona schools do to students who are constantly absent, or as they ultimately found, what they do even if kids are repeatedly a few minutes late, sometimes through no fault of their own. Well, administrators at boards of varying sizes, types, and demographic makeup often respond to a range of attendance violations by keeping students out of class altogether in the form of in or out of school suspensions. Being blocked from class for missing class, however, just seems to compound the problem that these officials say they're trying to solve. Yet, with comprehensive data readily available at either the state or federal levels, it was initially impossible to see how widespread the practice of suspending students for attendance issues was, or how many additional school days kids were missing as a result. Okay, so the researchers here couldn't tell, at least at first blush, which districts most frequently use suspensions in response to attendance problems, how heavily they leaned on out-of-school suspensions, which types of attendance violations were being punished most often, and whether students from historically marginalized groups were overrepresented when it came to disciplinary action. So what they did was submitted hundreds of records requests and used the responses to create an original database to answer those and other key questions. So they are going to dole this out in pieces. Hopefully, when we see you again in like 3 weeks, we'll be able to have some of those stats to look at. Now, you see, I set this up with the Bridges to Employment program because we don't have all this stuff in the Bridges to Employment program. We don't have politics. We don't have the punishing of people. There's only one consequence in the Bridges to Employment program. You finish, you get your high school diploma, or you get the brush-up skills you need, and then you move on. That's the only outcome. Until that outcome is achieved, you're in the Bridges to Employment program. You can't get out, okay? So when you join up with the Bridges to Employment program, you're going to have somebody there who will help you regardless of whether or not you're able to attend. I mean, come on, we know that life in the foster care system and then in the aging out process, the 18 to 21 years in that foster care system, your living situation can be extremely turbulent. That being said, you don't get punished if you're in the system for a while and doing well and progressing well, and then you need to drop out for a little while to take care of some other piece of business, and then you come back into the system. I cannot tell you how many times people will come to me and say, I haven't spoken with you in 6 months. Is the system still there? Can I still be in it? And then they'll come back and finish. And sometimes, I think it's just hard for people if you hated school in the first place and then haven't been in school for like 3 or 4 or 5 years, right? It's just so hard to get back in. And it's almost like the folks who are going to rehab for addictions, where they need 7 tries to get back into the program. So if any of this sounds like you, and you have any history with the foster care program, even if you were adopted or reunified at some point, you can give me a call, or you can you can email me at greg@ageoutangels.org. Again, that's greg@ageoutangels.org. And we can talk about what you need to do and how you need to go about getting through high school or getting the brush-up skills that you need, and then going on to a place where you can make enough money to be self-sufficient and start calling your own shots, because that's what I think I see the most, that youth who are in the foster care system and who are aging out of the foster care system want the most, is to be able to control their own destiny, to not constantly be under, feel like their necks are being stepped on, to some extent by the government, constantly being told what to do, constantly being threatened. If you don't do this, then this horrible thing will happen. Sick of that. And that's the goal of the Bridges to Employment program, is to free young people of that. So how do we fix this foster care system? And the thing about it is, the defenders of the system will say there are many, many children who are being helped. You know, let's start thinking about the range of this system. There are 430,000 children are in this system. You look around your community and you can point the finger at what's wrong with the system. And believe me, we'll do plenty of that tonight. But let's understand that we are talking about a system that is gigantic, that serves 430,000 people. That is impossible in so many ways, but we're going to look at some ways where it might actually be possible. So let's talk about, what are the implications, for policy and practice of doing, reform of the foster care system. Well, to relate the findings presented from the study into practice and policy, it's important to understand that there's some background issues here related to the current state of the child welfare system. Foremost is the growing recognition of the complex nature of society and the child welfare system's response to it. The child welfare system was designed as a temporary resource for troubled families. The child welfare system was never intended to provide the comprehensive range of social services that are demanded of it today, as increasing numbers of child welfare agencies have failed to meet the needs of populations they serve. There is a growing recognition that the child welfare system alone cannot possibly provide all the services needed by the families and children who come into it. Poverty and an array of social problems, as well as difficulties inherent in the public child welfare systems, have made it difficult to provide services to an increasingly diverse and troubled population. Many factors, both internal and external, demographic and structural, contribute to the wide scope of the crisis of a system with diminishing resources and increasing responsibilities. Substance abuse, inadequate housing, health needs, parental incarceration, and racial discrimination are just some of the issues that challenge the capacity of the child welfare system and its staff to provide adequate services to the families and children it serves. Moreover, the child welfare system was never intended to serve the vast numbers of children and families that are involved in the system today. Here's 1 year, for example. Just for an example, 1 year. 2,672,000 reports of possible maltreatment. 2 million. This is the breadth of what must be covered here. 903,000 substantiated cases of maltreatment, the majority of which, and this is the part that is so interesting, the majority of those 903,000 substantiated cases involved cases of neglect. We'll come back to that. About 1,300 children died of abuse or neglect. Furthermore, as of that same year, there were 542,000 children in the foster care system, and so this has been done a while ago. That number's been greatly reduced. Apparently, 172,000 waiting to be adopted. In total, in that same year, there were 805,000 families served by the child welfare system nationwide. That was according to an AFCARS report. AFCARS is the Bible of the statistics of the industry. These numbers do not take into account the number of families that were being served within the home, and in some cases that were in kinship placements. When they don't go through the normal channels, they don't get into these stats. Clearly, the problem has surpassed the child welfare system's capacity to handle it effectively, and more efficient measures are required to provide even the most basic services to the population it is intended to serve. Additionally, The ever-changing racial and ethnic makeup of this country has posed special challenges for child welfare agencies and staff. Racial and ethnic discrimination and language and cultural barriers to service provision have become commonplace in many social service systems, including public health and education, as well as in the judicial and child welfare system. In one year in particular, there were 8 racial and ethnic categories of children who entered foster care during that same year, and including those categories were American Indian / Alaskan American, non-Hispanic, Asian, non-Hispanic, Black, non-Hispanic, Hispanic of any race, and Hawaiian / Pacific Islander, non-Hispanic, to name a few, identifying the special needs of multiple racial and ethnic groups and developing practices, programs, and strategies. We're talking about 400,000 children. To meet their unique circumstances has proven an overwhelming task for a system that has yet to determine how best to meet the needs of its African American families. Pick one group, right? Families that have been overrepresented in the system for more than a decade. This is all the stuff that's being talked about right now, and actually, and I'm proud to say, kind of being worked on in New Jersey. Feel free to, write in and tell me how things are doing in your state with regard to this. We'd love to have you on a future show to talk about that. Finally, the stressful nature of working within the child welfare system has increased in direct response to the issues that I've just talked about, given the complex nature of today's child welfare involved families, combined with changing policies, diminishing resources to practice effectively. Child welfare agency staff now must possess expertise in a number of different areas, including social work, psychology, job training, child development, and human resources, among others. And by the way, we lay this same garbage on our police department and the same stuff we lay on our schools. This is all the same. We're asking all these people to raise our children for us, and they're not working together well enough yet, but let's see, let's see what happens here. In addition, the increasing tension brought on by media exposure to extreme cases of child abuse and neglect and the resulting onslaught of bad publicity and negative attitudes toward the child welfare system have contributed to burnout, insecurity, and high turnover among child welfare agency employees. This, in combination with the issues described, provides a snapshot of a system that is struggling to operate effectively and in the manner in which it was intended. So these findings presented in the study suggest that despite the challenges it faces and the factors that are outside of its control, there are several factors that public child welfare agencies can address to improve child welfare practice and the delivery of services to children and families, including families of color. In addition, several other issues have emerged from the findings that can be used to help inform future child welfare policies. Let's talk about what those are. Let's talk about fixing the system. Let's talk about what it will take to somehow make all this better. And I know I want to pause for a second and just give voice to the people who want to just end the system. And that's cool. If you have a plan that works, that would be great. That would be great. Because what we have to realize here is that for all the good this system does, and it does do some good, but for all the good that it does, its level of harm is just so visible, and it seems prevalent enough to cause alarm bells. And so that's what we're dealing with here. It may not be the overwhelming percentage of kids in foster care who are maltreated. It may not be that. But what it is that too many people in foster care are not being treated well, are not being given a chance to grow and to thrive and to become the best that they can be, and as valuable as they don't realize they can be, which can be brought out of them with the right moves. And so this is to sort of help that, to move in that proper directions. And so, what are the implications for practice? Can you imagine, like, if you're a social worker nowadays, And every time you go, like, for an investigation, you're thinking, is this the one that's, going to get me on television in the worst possible light, right? Is this the one I'm going to get prosecuted for this one? Over the years, that the child welfare system has come under increasing scrutiny from society and the media regarding its ability to effectively serve children and families. Recruiting and retaining competent, well-trained staff has similarly become more difficult. Budget cuts take their toll, especially if the agency is handling budget cuts by laying off experienced, higher paid workers and replacing them with inexperienced workers at a lower salary. Two strategies that actually can be implemented in this situation, like workforce issues. Okay, so that's the game you're going to play, right? While agency administrators may not have control over the types of families and individuals they serve, they do have control over the type of work environment they create and support and the employees they choose to hire. You see, this is an area where from internally, some things can start to be made better. In this study, several factors related to the workforce were critical to both worker retention and satisfaction and effective service delivery to the children and families. First, there's the issue of support, specifically administrative support. In order for child welfare staff to feel confident and effective, and one might argue perform accordingly, they require support from within the agency. This support takes several forms, including administrative support and encouragement, supervision and oversight, strong peer relationships, and manageable caseloads. Manageable caseloads, imagine such a thing. And remember, we're reimagining child welfare. In agencies in which one or more of these factors was reported absent, participants, usually direct service workers, talked about feeling overwhelmed and unsure of their ability to make good decisions. So there. Second, there's the issue of staff training and experience. To be effective in dealing with more diverse families than in previous years, child welfare staff require greater breadth and depth of education and training than in previous years. With regard to worker bias and cultural awareness and sensitivity, it is important to note that in general, agency administrators were very sensitive to these issues and they were willing to address them. However, in most cases, they were somewhat unsure as to how best to address them. Finally, there's the issue of resources. Agency administrators can provide the strongest possible support to their staffs. They can also ensure that only the most highly qualified candidates are hired. But when resources are lacking, however, practice will be compromised. External resources are so important to good practice. With regard to external resources, participants reported that they simply need more resources to serve clients, including financial resources to pay for and agencies to provide mental health and substance abuse services. They also reported needing additional resources to keep families together, including relationships with agencies that could provide such basic necessities as food, housing, employment opportunities, and childcare options. And I would add transportation to that as well. You throw transportation in there, and that's a product you could get behind. While the child welfare system has been plagued with challenges in recent years, it still plays a central role in the child and family service delivery system. Agencies can be supported to hire competent staff, administration can be supportive, and resources can be made available to provide quality service. So let's get into the area of disproportionality, because that just goes right along with the poverty. I mean, we create a systemic problem where poverty is prevalent within specific racial and socioeconomic groups, and then we penalize them for it, punish them for it. Hell, we'll put them in jail for it. So what about disproportionalities? Here are some strategies for serving children and families of color, okay? Starting with kinship care, subsidized guardianship. Use of relatives and fictive kin as caregivers for children is an important measure for increasing permanency for minority children while simultaneously maintaining ties to their family system. Relatives can be used as caregivers in three distinct ways. They can become guardians. of children and thus be legally responsible for the care of the children without the requirements and benefits that are attached to being a foster parent. I know many people who are guardians. You know what they get? They get nothing except they are the undying love of they are mom to the children that they raise, the ones who are guardians. Okay, here's the second way, though, is and also, before I do the second way, providing subsidies to these guardians has proven to be beneficial. So there are certain circumstances by which a guardian can receive some subsidy. Okay, next up, relatives can become foster parents. Now, this status would require them to be licensed using the same criteria used for unrelated caregivers. They'd have to be regularly monitored by child welfare personnel. You got to go through the system if you want the money, okay? Finally, relatives can become adoptive parents of children. Now, as with guardianship, interestingly, providing subsidies to adoptive relatives has found to be beneficial. It's important to note that in Illinois, subsidized relative placement has resulted in increased permanency for children and reduced racial disproportionality in the child welfare system. Question coming in, do you think the unpaid kinship caretakers just don't trust the system? Do you think the unpaid kinship caretakers just don't trust the system? So your question is, you're asking me if I think the reason they choose that unpaid path is because they don't want to be in the system at all. You know, honestly, I don't think they're thinking it through that clearly. I think they get told by someone at some point, like, oh, you could be a guardian if that's what, you know, is the most efficient path. And I see your follow-up question there. They don't want their kids on the rolls on the list of kids who are in foster care? No, I don't honestly think that that's what it is. I think what it is they don't know what their options are, and they get told by somebody. They get told by somebody, whoever, who looks like they're in charge. You could be a guardian, you could be an adoptive parent, you could be a this, you could be a that, and this is how you do it. And so that's what they do. And that's how they end up in that situation. I don't think it's a situation that is analyzed and then a decision is made. I think a decision is made in 22 seconds. So I want to talk, though, I want to continue about addressing disproportionality. That's what's important right now, okay? And so another way, along with finding someone to take care of the child who is closer to their family and can hold their family unit together. That's sort of the point here. If you can get a child with a family, odds are it will be better for them. Family gatherings, staying connected to a family, that whole thing. Now, listen, that's in theory, okay? There probably is a foster child out there. In fact, I'm thinking of a couple off the top of my head who I know personally, who would argue that and say, my God, when my family got together, that was the worst time in my life. And yes, there are children who do need to be removed. That's a fact, and being able to analyze that is important. But when we keep talking about how such a large proportion are just neglect, which is usually caused by poverty and lack of income, then maybe there's a chance to keep a lot more families together. Hopefully it's a smaller group that really needs to be separated from their family. So let's talk about this other thing that addresses disproportionality, which is family conferencing. Now, this originated, believe it or not, in New Zealand. Family conferencing calls for the collaboration of multiple parties who have an interest in the well-being of the child. So family conferencing, collaboration, multiple parties who all care about the child and who are involved in the child welfare system. So you got the child, the family, the people in the child welfare system. This is referred to as the family assessment process. And they do this in North Carolina, which was the site that was implementing actually the strategy in the study. This approach brings together biological parents, relatives, neighbors, friends, religious and other supports, as well as professionals with the goal of averting placement. So let's not do reunification, let's avert the placement in the first place. These meetings occur frequently and, as part of the program model, are designed to emphasize the safety, permanency, and well-being of the child. The community is integrally involved in the decision-making process about the child, and thus tends to be involved as participants in the child's care. You know, like a church member providing daycare, a grandmother caring for a child full-time while the mother participates in a drug treatment program. This is a major component of the service delivery strategy in the county in which racial disproportionality was reduced, is from McDowell County in North Carolina. And I went online and I found there's this sort of thing that they send to families. It's called What My Family Can Expect During the Family Assessment Process. So there's no like ambushing your family. Nobody shows up at your kid's school unannounced, yanks them out of class and gives them the third degree. They do, if you're, you know, if you've been reported and they have to go through the process, they're at least trying to make it as painless as possible. So here it is. Step one, they send this to you. When possible, the social worker will contact you before visiting your home or your child. During the first visit, the social worker will interview the family together and complete a safety assessment. Okay? When possible and agreeable, you and the social worker will gather information from people such as teachers, doctors, neighbors, babysitters, and other professionals. This process is expected to be completed within 45 days. From this information, DSS will make a case decision. The case decision will be one of the following. Let's say it is services provided. Child Protective Services is no longer needed. This means the case will be closed if supervision is no longer needed to ensure the child safely. I would think that would be the best possible outcome. Or services not recommended. This case is closed, right? There could be services recommended. This means that services are voluntary and you'll be given recommendations. And then there's services needed. This means that services are mandatory and a social worker will be in contact with you and your family to begin supportive services. Now, to answer the person's question who wrote in about people not wanting to be on the rolls, okay, well, participating in this has to be to some degree unnerving. And who would want to be on the rolls? And this looks like this questionnaire is as nice and friendly and everything as possible, but like look at the hidden things. Say when possible. When possible, the social worker will contact you before visiting your home. Okay, but what if it's not possible? Now, how frequently is it not possible? Really frequently, because people change their phone numbers all the time. People in this cohort lose their phones constantly. Change their phone numbers all the time, change their addresses, move, get kicked out of one place, move into another place, get moved here, get moved there by social services. Happens all the time. It happens all the time. So then what are you going to do? Start barging in, right? Show up unannounced and say, look, I did the best I could. I tried to get through. So, you know, there's still a system here. But look, this looks like it will help more people than were being helped before. And so, you know, you have to go along with that kind of an incremental level. Don't just totally knock it out of the park. And if you can put together one of these groups of people to help the child, if you can actually put that together, it will have a good outcome. You know, it's not wanting to participate in that it won't have a good outcome. Not wanting to participate in the family conferencing part of that. Another thing that's important in directly addressing disproportionality is recruitment and retention of minority, foster, and adoptive parents. I mean, come on, the majority of sites identified the recruitment of minority and foster and adoptive parents as an important strategy to reduce racial disproportionality. Targeting recruitment to minority communities, specifically minority social organizations and institutions, again, churches, was emphasized. Now, there's this thing called concurrent planning. I wonder how many of you are familiar with concurrent planning. It's fascinating. Concurrent planning. On the surface, it doesn't differentially benefit minority families, okay? But many participants felt that it was effective in reducing the number of minority children remaining in the foster care system. And here's how it works. This practice requires a child welfare staff to work for reunification while simultaneously seeking another permanent home for the targeted children. This is like loaded with pitfalls, okay? Children may not remain in the system as long as when the practices occurred sequentially. Eh, it can be so misused. Like if done correctly, but it's hard for people to believe that a social worker, that it's possible for a human being to be a double agent in that way, to represent both sides, the reunification side and the adoptive family side. You can't do it. Promoting permanency. Here's one. An agency-wide focus on permanency for all child welfare involved families has a residual impact of fostering permanency for minority families and therefore reducing their numbers in the child welfare system. But it's great when it goes with supporting biological families. Prevention. Prevention. Most participants asserted that preventing minority children from entering the system was crucial for addressing racial disproportionality. Prevention programs that supported children to remain with their families of origin can be implemented by child welfare agencies with a particular eye to the needs of minority children and families. Thus, these programs should be culturally sensitive regarding services and employ staff that is reflective of the culture of the targeted population. It is important to note that a broad conceptualization of culture emerged from the findings of this study and included religious, language, immigration, ethnic, racial, family composition, and class factors. Several different types of preventive services for biological families were perceived as particularly effective for minority families. And what a lot of the upend movement, I think, promotes is community-based strategies and collaborations with other agencies. The long-held practice in child welfare services to contract out specific services has had particular implications for minority families. First and foremost, child welfare agencies have been able to link with programs designed to serve particular ethnic groups. See, this is starting to sound, like it's targeted properly. Often these programs are part of agencies that emerge from informal or formal institutions in the minority community and have particular philosophical approaches that promote the well-being of that specific population. In addition, these collaborations allow for a focus on a particular service strategy, such as prevention and reunification, recruitment of minority and adoptive families. See, they can be all-encompassing in so many ways, or post-placement services. These linkages also provide service settings for families that are in their individual communities versus in centralized and often bureaucratic setting of the child welfare public agency. These various factors promote more intimate relationships between the service providers and the recipients, as well as the provision of more culturally and otherwise responsive services. So what are the implications for this policy? Well, there also were issues that emerged from the findings that have implications for child welfare policy. Foremost is the emphasis on prevention. Prevention is the thing that's coming out of this in a big way. Participants felt strongly that shifting the philosophy of the child welfare system from one that intervenes after the fact to one that focuses on keeping children out of the system would have profound implications for the numbers of children coming into care, and especially for children of color. In addition to keeping children from coming into the system, prevention is less expensive than removal. Another issue that emerged is the manner in which policies are created, because policy is often driven by public perception primarily. And because public perception is influenced by the media's portrayal of events, child welfare policies are often developed in response to a perceived problem or crisis. Creating policies this way sometimes results in policies that are removed from the practices they were designed to guide. Participants in this study felt strongly that an emphasis on prevention and family reunification, including financial resources to support them. They never get the money. $75 billion to Ukraine, and we can't get the money, including financial resources to support them, might be a more viable solution to the large numbers of children in care. Again, emphasizing the importance of keeping families out of the system to begin with. This example underscores the importance of policies that are driven by careful examination of the strengths and limitations of the system, rather than political considerations. It also emphasizes the importance of policies that are developed to promote viable options for workers and families at each point along the child welfare decision-making spectrum. Another important issue that emerged was the emphasis on improving services to children and families by contracting out more services to community-based and private child welfare organizations. With increased responsibilities and caseloads, along with the diminishing financial resources, public agencies are often operating at or over the limits of available resources. Tasked with finding alternative means to provide services for children and families, agencies have turned to contractual relationships with private or nonprofit child welfare agencies. Happens all the time. Participants in this study talked about the value of having access to these services, especially community-based services. It takes a village. It really does. Think of 420,000 kids in the system. Remember those numbers. Finally, there's the issue of reporting. Participants across the sites talked about a variety of factors influencing who gets reported and for what. Closer partnerships between child welfare agencies and schools, hospitals, and other common sources of reports could facilitate more accurate and equitable identification of cases of maltreatment at the point of reporting. Moreover, there's a lack of consistency across child welfare agencies regarding standards for what constitutes abuse or neglect. To reduce worker bias and uncertainty when making judgments regarding cases, definitions of abuse and neglect could be clarified and standardized. Standard definitions might also reduce the fear and concern workers have when they're forced to make decisions in the eye of the media. So for our last show of 2022, let's reimagine child welfare together, shall we? What does reimagining child welfare look like? Well, let's remember how we got here. The harms caused by the child welfare system are so severe that a long-term reduction in the system's footprint and a reimagining of a non-coercive, rights-respecting child protection approach are needed. The child welfare system's purpose is often described as promoting the well-being of children and strengthening families to support children's development. However, the system's interventions too often undercut its goals, failing to adequately address the needs of the family, and in some cases exacerbating the problems it intended to remedy. Families interviewed for this report described how system involvement exacerbated poverty and economic hardship. I mean, think about it. You know, you're forced to show up in court on a day when losing a day of work not only costs you money, but can get you fired. It just sucks, leading to the loss of employment, housing, and benefits. Some parents said child welfare intervention interfered with their recovery from substance abuse or substance use disorder. Despite recognizing that access to resources and social supports are protective factors that may prevent unintended neglect and protect children from maltreatment, state and local agencies within the child welfare system spend nearly 10 times more on the foster system than on services that would support families reunifying with their children. Foster parents are entitled to monthly payments per child. Those who adopt children from the foster care system continue receiving these payments until the child turns 18. In some cases, adoptive families also receive health insurance for the child until they reach adulthood. Financial support and health insurance coverage help strengthen foster and adoptive families. If these same benefits were offered to families separated by the child welfare system, it could have a similarly positive effect, don't you think? Sixto Cancel, the CEO and founder of the nonprofit Think of Us, an organization committed to transforming the child welfare system, described the need for a system that is responsive to actual needs. There's real people behind this. You know, this is what Sixto Cancel said. What we need is a system where people who are dealing with poverty issues get the support to be able to have the breathing room to meet their basic needs and learn whatever they need to learn in order to be self-sufficient. And sometimes that means up-training, skill training, retraining, whatever it might be. And children need to be in a family setting where they can get the support and healing that they need and to be able to also develop at the same time. Some system partners recognize that reforms are needed. In its response to Human Rights Watch during the research phase that led to this report, New York City's Administration for Children's Services reacted in a very favorable way and implemented systems immediately. Now we need to talk about reporting, though. Urgently needed measures include replacing that anonymous reporting with secure confidential reporting, reducing unnecessary child welfare interventions, expanding the role of parent advocates, giving parents more support, time to complete service plans, increasing due process protections for parents. These steps could mitigate some of the harms that are documented in this report. Long-term change requires addressing the extreme economic hardship at the heart of many child welfare cases and the corrosive impact of systemic racism. A meaningful solution requires focused attention by the federal government on relevant issues to address that hardship, meaningful structural change that also requires the U.S. to decriminalize the possession of drugs for personal use, I mean on the federal level, and fund development and provision of non-punitive supportive approaches to assist people with problematic drug use. In short, the U.S. continues to grapple with systemic racism and policies and practices that hurt Black families and communities. Lawmakers should rethink the existing approach to child protection and look for ways to expand social safety nets and strengthen families. It is time to reimagine the child welfare system. And I'm not going to leave you with that, even though it was pretty dramatic, huh? Wouldn't you think? Because what we haven't done yet tonight, and we just have a few minutes, okay? We just have, if you want to get out early tonight, Ruben, it's okay. Just a couple more minutes, all right? But I want to say happy holidays to everybody. And I want to address the examples of white privilege that you probably haven't thought about. Unless you're a person of color, these are just instances that you just don't think about. In fact, I know I'm speaking for myself, I'm usually on the other side of them. So to put myself in the other person's shoes, I found this tremendously interesting. It's an article in 2021. Oh yeah, and in a minute, I'm going to draw a parallel between the article that the research study that I read to you about what's needed in the foster care system reform and what's happening right now. Okay, so stay with me. All right, the white privilege example. All right, let's do number 12. This is from the point of view of a female of color. I can swear or dress in secondhand clothes or not answer letters without having people attribute these choices to the bad morals, the poverty, or the illiteracy of my race. I can speak in public to a powerful male group without putting my race on trial. I think about that. I mean, how often are you, as a white person, how often do you walk into a room where you're the only white person? It sort of never happens. I can speak in public. I can do well in a challenging situation without being called a credit to my race. Yes, I've been called, you aren't like those, and they're referring to Jews. You weren't like those other ones from New York. You're one of the good ones. I'm never asked to speak for all the people of my racial group. Hey, so what do you Black people think about this? Oh, goodness gracious. Ways that we manage to hurt each other. You realize, of course, that the reason humans rule the planet is because we're the smartest and we can organize. We can organize like in whole countries. The Chinese can have, 2 billion people marching to the same lockstep, right? That's why we own this planet. And because we own this planet, our only real enemies are ourselves. We're the ones who hurt each other. We're the ones who kill each other. Now, the study that I read to you tonight, the research that I read to you tonight, these are things that are all currently being implemented in New Jersey, and I'd love you to tell me if they're being implemented in other places. But this study was written in 2003, almost 20 years ago. This stuff that people are like expressing as though it were a revolution today. Sorry, it's so upsetting that thank you, Robin. A revelation. People are saying these things as though they are revelations today. I'm nothing without you, Robin. And they're not. They're not. This stuff has been around for years, years, 20 years. Some of the people who are graduating as social workers today were like 1 or 2 years old when this article came out. Okay? Oh, God bless us all, everyone. I will see you third week of January, I think. I'm sorry, second week of January. Um, so in about 3 weeks. So stay safe, okay? Um, it just amazes me sometimes how we harm ourselves, and maybe this will be the time that we won't. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for a wonderful year. I can't wait to come back with you next year. New format, new ways we're going to go about things, new ways to hopefully have a little more fun, be a little more entertaining. But hey, never, never lose sight of the message that we have to help 420,000 children across this country who are all individuals, and we may never forget about each and every one of them. So until I see you again in 3 weeks, everybody stay safe. Thanks to Robin for producing. Thanks to Ruben for being there. God bless you all. God bless everyone at Hamilton Radio. Music provided by Mozart. Stay safe until next year. Let's make this the safest and best holiday season ever. Good night, everybody.